All right, let's cut to the chase. Big courtroom move just dropped. The Department of Justice pulled its appeal at the Fifth Circuit. And because of that, the federal rule on pistol braces has been vacated nationwide. Now, before anyone lights up the group chat, listen close. This is a win on procedure, not an all-out reversal of every legal theory the ATF has used. The court's hit was procedural, Administrative Procedure Act stuff, which means the rule fell because of how it was made, not necessarily because the ATF doesn't have any bite under the National Firearms Act. What that means on the ground is messy and real. For pistol brace owners, this feels like a victory, and it is. But it's not a permanent ironclad shield. Agencies can and will try to patch procedural holes, and Congress still holds the authority to act. We're not at the finish line. Stick with me. I'll break down what the vacatur actually did, what it didn't do, where the legal danger still sits, and the two ways this can go next. If you want me to keep the same 10 points and just reflow them, we're set. What just happened? Really? So here's where we peel back the layers. When the Department of Justice backed out of that Fifth Circuit appeal, the practical effect was this. The court's earlier order didn't just pause the ATF's pistol brace rule, it wiped it off the board entirely. In legal terms, that's called a vacatur. It doesn't just apply to one plaintiff or one district. It covers the whole country. But don't confuse that with Congress repealing the law. Nobody changed the National Firearms Act or the Gun Control Act. What the judges said is that the ATF broke the rules of rulemaking. They tried to rewrite how pistol-braced firearms are classified without following the full public comment process under the Administrative Procedure Act. That's bureaucratic overreach 101. Now the rule's off the table. But that doesn't mean the ATF's hands are tied forever. They could, in theory, come back, fix the process, and drop a new rule that looks awfully similar to the old one. That's why this isn't the time to holster the conversation. It's the time to stay alert, know the difference between winning a battle and winning the war, and keep pressure where it counts. The limits of this ruling. Here's the catch. Most headlines won't tell you. This ruling didn't slam the door on the ATF's authority altogether. The judges didn't say, "Hey, ATF, you can't regulate pistol braces." What they said was, "You didn't follow the proper procedure when you tried to." That's a huge difference. See, this wasn't about the National Firearms Act itself. It was about how the ATF used that law to sneak in a brand new rule without going through Congress or fully opening it up for public comment. The court called foul, basically saying, if you want to change how millions of gun owners are treated under federal law, you'd better do it by the book. But because the issue was procedural, it leaves the agency an open lane to regroup. They can redraft, republish, and try again, this time checking every bureaucratic box. And if a future administration leans anti-gun, you can bet they'll try to drive right through that lane. So, yeah, today's decision pulls the teeth out of this specific rule. But the monster's not dead, it's just knocked down. The next move depends on how far groups like GOA and the state of Texas push to make that knockout permanent. The real risks that still lurk. Now here's where the rubber meets the road. This so-called win doesn't mean the fight's over. It just means the ATF's got to take a lap before trying again. They still believe they have authority under the National Firearms Act to treat braced pistols like short-barreled rifles. And if a new administration decides to go hard on gun regulation, the same rule could come roaring right back. Just rewritten to survive a court challenge. Think of it like patching a leaky roof instead of rebuilding the house. The ATF got caught cutting corners, so now they'll tighten their process, refile the paperwork, and try to push the same restriction through the correct channels next time. If that happens, gun owners could find themselves right back in court fighting a rule that looks different on paper, but hits just as hard in real life. And remember, even though the vacatur makes the current brace rule legally void, it doesn't stop the ATF from acting in the field. We've already seen regional offices hand out mixed messages and continue investigations as if nothing changed. That's not theory. That's reality for guys out there dealing with compliance calls and unannounced visits. Bottom line, stay informed, keep your documentation straight, and don't assume this procedural win equals permanent safety. It's a pause, not peace. GOA and Texas fireback. All right, so while the ATF's rule is down, but not out, the gun owners of America and the state of Texas aren't wasting a second. They've gone straight to federal court asking for something bigger, a permanent injunction. That's not just a pause button. That's a legal chokehold that would bar the ATF from ever trying to sneak pistol braces back under the National Firearms Act again. Their argument's simple and sharp. The ATF's been using the NFA like a backdoor, turning ordinary pistol owners into potential felons overnight without any act of Congress. GOA and Texas want a judge to flat-out close that door for good. They're saying, no more creative rulemaking. If you want to change the law, take it to Capitol Hill. And honestly, that's where the weight of this fight really sits. It's not just about braces. It's about who writes the rules. Unelected bureaucrats or the people's representatives. If the injunction lands, it would set a precedent that keeps future agencies from stretching old laws into brand new bans. Now, they've filed that motion in the Northern District of Texas, and the Department of Justice, now under the Trump administration, has to respond. That's the next key moment. Once that reply hits, the court decides whether to put this thing in legal cement or leave the ATF an escape hatch. The proof in the real world. Here's the part that separates theory from boots-on-the-ground reality. Even with that nationwide vacatur in place, there are still reports of the ATF acting like the rule never died. Case in point, the United States versus Toronto case, where prosecutors kept leaning on pistol brace arguments after the rule was tossed. That tells you something. Inside the system, the memo hasn't fully sunk in yet. Then you've got those internal ATF emails floating around. Some offices telling agents to proceed with caution. Others saying business as usual. That's pure chaos for regular gun owners. Imagine getting one message from your local field office, another from a national notice, and both contradict each other. So while the law technically favors us right now, the execution on the ground hasn't caught up. That's why groups like GOA are staying on the offensive. They're collecting examples of overreach, documenting cases, and feeding it all back to the courts to show that without a permanent injunction, ATF will keep bending the rules until someone stops them. It's the classic difference between a win on paper and a win in practice. And until the courts lock it down in permanent ink, it's on the firearms community to stay loud, stay legal, and keep the pressure steady. The constitutional backbone behind the fight. Now let's dig into the foundation, holding this whole battle upright. The Constitution. Groups like GOA and the state of Texas aren't just throwing procedural darts. They're hitting deep with constitutional arguments rooted in recent Supreme Court precedent. Take the West Virginia versus EPA case from 2022. That ruling laid down the major questions doctrine, basically saying if an agency wants to make a major policy change that affects millions of Americans, it needs clear permission from Congress. The ATF didn't get that permission. They tried to stretch old language in the National Firearms Act into something brand new, which fits that same overreach pattern the court already slapped down in West Virginia. Then there's Bruin, the landmark Second Amendment case that rewrote how courts must evaluate gun restrictions. It says any regulation on firearms has to align with this nation's historical tradition of gun laws. Good luck finding an 1800-era rule banning pistol braces. That history just doesn't exist. Put those rulings together, and the message is loud and clear. Federal agencies can't just manufacture new gun laws out of thin air. They can enforce laws that Congress passed. That's it. And if the courts keep applying that logic, the ATF's pistol brace ambitions could crumble for good. The two ways this could end. So where does all this lead? Right now, there are two distinct paths ahead. one that locks in real protection, and another that leaves the door wide open for another round of government overreach. Option 1, the Northern District of Texas grants that permanent injunction GOA and Texas are pushing for. That would slam the lid shut on the ATF's pistol brace rule once and for all. It would stand as a court-backed reminder that only Congress can redefine what qualifies as an SBR under the National Firearms Act. If that happens, it's not just a win for brace owners. It's a victory for the entire Second Amendment community. It'd set a precedent that stops agencies from flipping definitions whenever politics change. Option 2, the court declines to issue that injunction. In that case, the ATF could regroup, rewrite the rule with cleaner procedure, and relaunch it under a new administration. That means more lawsuits, more confusion, and the same fight starting all over again. Either way, this moment defines the future. Because if this ruling stands tall and expands, it could ripple far beyond braces, into suppressor rules, semi-auto bans, and anything else the bureaucracy tries to push. This isn't just one courtroom win. It's a line in the sand about who makes the law in this country. Where things stand right now. Here's the latest snapshot. The fight's sitting squarely in the Northern District of Texas, with GOA and Texas waiting for the court to rule on that permanent injunction request. The Department of Justice, under the Trump administration, now has the task of responding to that motion. That's the next big flashpoint. When DOJ files its response, we'll see whether they plan to defend the ATF's old logic or quietly let it fade away. Either way, that filing will tell us how serious this administration is about reining in rogue agencies. Meanwhile, the temporary vacatur is still active nationwide, meaning, for now, the pistol brace rule is void. But because it was struck down on procedural grounds, not constitutional ones, it could theoretically return under a different face. That's why GOA's play for a permanent injunction is so important. It's the only way to keep the ATF from rebranding the same rule and running it through the system again. So if you're watching this thinking, we finally won, I'd say this. We won a round, not the whole match. The paperwork's not dry and the fight's not over until the ink on that injunction is set. Why this fight matters for every gun owner. At the end of the day, this case isn't just about pistol braces, it's about who gets to make the rules in this country. Congress writes the laws. Agencies like the ATF are supposed to enforce them, not invent new ones whenever politics shift. What's playing out in Texas right now is a test of that principle. If the court locks in a permanent injunction, it'll be a signal that the rule of law still means something, that the Constitution still puts the people, not unelected bureaucrats, in the driver's seat. It would also put the brakes on a dangerous trend we've seen for years, where agencies try to regulate by redefinition instead of legislation. But if the court backs off, then brace owners, rifle owners, and the entire shooting community will have to stay ready for the next wave of reinterpretations. Because once an agency learns it can stretch the law without real consequences, it'll keep doing it until somebody says, stop. So keep your head in the game. Follow these cases, support the groups fighting them, and never assume a temporary win means permanent freedom. Every shooter, every range buddy, every responsible gun owner has skin in this game. Because if they can rewrite the rules on pistol braces, they can do it to anything. Make sure you like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Stay sharp.